I'm not really sure exactly what this video is. That is to say, this video is not going to be like the other videos that you've seen on this channel. If you are looking for the next Clock Tower game, I will definitely have it up Friday, and you can tune in to me Wednesday. I think I'm going to be posting this the same day that I make it, which is today, Tuesday the 2nd. But we'll see. For a while, there's been a certain concept brewing within my head, because if you've seen my stream, if you've seen some of my past videos, you may have come across times where I did some amount of poetry recitation. And I love poetry. Some of it has even been my own, and I believe I've composed about 40 poems, which is, to say, not many in comparison to someone like Milton or Keats or Wordsworth, etc. If anything, I would consider myself an amateur poet at best. I do it because I love it, not because it pays the bills. And also, it's been a very long time, well, barring the Ballad of Seat 7, which, if you want to catch that, I'll leave a link below to the game. But barring that particular poem, it had been there'd been a span of time. I guess I do have another one called The Shores of Lethe that was also more recent. It's interesting how moments of trauma or anxiety spark the creative intellect. But the concept that I had been mulling over, I was sort of thinking of calling something along the lines of Etre-READS. The original concept actually started with literature. If you caught my streams during my weekend or my birthday week this year, you'll remember that I read Paradise Lost over the course of about 12 and a half, 13 hours, which is about how long it takes to read that book aloud. And one of my central philosophies is we all gain by sharing. And having studied the written word and having read something as daunting as Paradise Lost can be, and still to a certain extent is, even for me, there are times where I have to pause and be like, hold on, let me parse what the hell Milton is saying, because I completely forget the structure of this particular sentence. But utilizing that as a means of helping people, as a means of helping to introduce people to a text that otherwise is very daunting, or just show an interpretation of a famous work and show maybe a new angle, some of the jabs and japes that might exist between the lines that other readers might not have picked up on. It's one of the reasons why I so enjoy going back to books that I have already read, because undoubtedly my newfangled knowledge from either just living or from reading other texts has gleaned some insight into a hidden joke that I might have missed the first time. But this video wasn't ever going to be about a book. On November 3rd, 2010, my grandmother passed away. In retrospect, she was 79, so she lived to quite a ripe age. And about 2 weeks prior to her passing, she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And I remember thinking to myself at the time that I could only imagine the amount of pain that she might have been walking around with on a daily basis, given that cancer was only being discovered at stage 4. And today, September 2nd, would have been her 94th birthday. A year after my grandmother's passing, I was out visiting some relatives because we always gathered together on Labor Day or over Labor Day weekend. And naturally, with Labor Day falling so close to my grandmother's birthday, there was a lot of talk and a lot of reflection and a lot of memories. And I went home and I sat down and I wrote a poem. I call this one Especially. Even on Sundays, Grandma exerted herself, filling her kitchen with offbeat clangs and the smoky scents of bacon and extra runny scrambled eggs, just the way he likes them. Navigating the packed confines, stepping lightly around cereal, boxed rice, canned vegetables, soups and fruit cocktails, pots and pans and Tupperware seemingly never used, yet always wanting to be washed. On Labor Day, she rested, driving to Petaluma, our hub of familial connection, eating crab cakes made by off-sprung hands with passed-down duty, especially for her, and lounged on the living room sofa, entertaining sons and daughters, in-laws and immediates, grandchildren old and young, with a slew of stories about them all, highlighting each and every one until they all shone with the same magnificence as her laugh-lined, creased cheeks. While crab cakes made especially for her cooled in the warmth of the afterglow, until ears closed and mouths opened, inviting brief respite. When evening set, she'd rise, orbiting the room. We, in turn, circled around her like the earthly concubines of the thunder god, still mortal in body, but momentarily immortal in muttered farewell, and revel in shared embraces spanning seconds, lasting infinitely, before at last escorting her to the door. Years later, on Labor Day, we'll visit, celebrating with crab cakes made from recipes remembered, especially for her, sharing stories of ourselves seated beside her, eyes cast up to meet hers, brighter than the final moments of stars when, overflowing with light, they burst with blinding magnificence and wink out of old existence and newly begin again. Changed, but ever a part of the ever-expanding multitudinal oscillation. Space. As dusk drapes the sky, we rise as moons made meteorites, embracing tightly our lasting memories as we mutter a farewell and gravely depart. I loved my grandmother. One of my main philosophies, and maybe one of the reasons I also like stories so much, is that we all are stories. And that particular philosophy has at least been helpful for me in navigating away from what past trauma I have faced. Because if we're all stories, then there's always the opportunity for a new chapter. There's always the opportunity for a turning point. There's always the opportunity to change the course of the story, to change what the outcome might be. And there's something beautifully empowering like that. And I also think, in a way, the people that I have lost in my life, the loved ones that I've lost, now reside within me in a certain aspect. And I can only hope that I help pass on their impact on me elsewhere. Going back sort of to a previous point that I mentioned, we all benefit from sharing. No one has to give anything up. A friend actually reached out to me recently, and we were having a little bit of like a conversation back and forth. And she just sort of threw a compliment out at me. And I struggle with compliments in a certain regard. I'm getting better at appreciating them, but one of the elements of the trauma that I experienced was people utilizing compliments as a means of manipulation, emotional, verbal, etc. And so I'm always wary about offering them because I don't want to ever be perceived in that way. I don't want to have that impact, regardless of the fact that I can't control how a person interprets my actions. And I think I am at least getting better about listening to my therapist when I center things that way. When I acknowledge the sort of lack of agency I have over that. But compliments still give me pause at times, unless there's sort of a naturalness to it, unless the context makes it, explains them, I guess, if that makes sense. But she mentioned that we live in a world and in an era where, like, everybody is lashing out all the time and stressed all the time. Like, not that it's, this isn't a judgment of anyone's character. Like, we are all stressed, and therefore we're more prone to lashing out, or more prone to negative behavior, and more prone to negative emotion. And when we're exhausted, it is not the easiest thing to navigate those types of negative emotions gracefully or easily. And so one of the things that she is trying to do is as she puts it, she's in her telling people you think are good why you think they're good. Seeing value, or seeing the value in people and highlighting that. Not just occasionally being friendly, but telling people what they do that makes them a delight to be around. And I think maybe that's a little bit of the bittersweetness that comes when I return to this poem, is I don't think I ever really did that with my grandmother. I don't think I ever really did that with my aunt. And that's not to say I believe they thought I hated them in the end. I think they knew that I loved them. But man, I was not raised in a household where earnestly telling someone you loved them was a thing that was natural. It was a thing that was regular. But there was always a subtext of familial duty. There wasn't really the navigating of more negative emotion. For a number of reasons. And least of all is that families and relationships are messy. And I want to be clear that I'm not harping on my family at all. I think we have seen a lot of growth over the years. And that is good. But I'm just noticing something that I think I want to also try to make a pledge to do, which is tell the people that I think are good why I think they're good. And I am mostly known, if you are on the Nocturne server at all, for wearing rose-colored glasses until I just can't because all of the red flags are blocking them. And that comes with what I would call sometimes an excessive level of patience beyond what might be necessary. But the thing that does allow me to do is approach people, help them, like help shore up any sort of difficulties, help shore up tensions, help maintain relationships, and move on in an earnest and honest way without just sweeping things under the rug and pretending like things have moved on. Because I look back at my past and that was my past. It never was remedied. It was just suppressed. And then I went into therapy. And 10 out of 10. Trust the process, y'all. And if you do ever, side note, if you go into therapy, A, highly recommend. Everyone needs someone to talk to. But B, if you find someone and you're not really jiving, that's also okay. You can find another one. Not every therapist is made for every patient. I caught a couple of clips of I want to say it's on Netflix. No, Paramount? Something. Of a show called Couples Therapy, where real life couples go into a couples therapy session and you get to see therapy sessions between couples. And the doctor is amazing, but there is a couple that she eventually says, I don't think I'm the therapist for you. Like, you can recognize when you are not able to work together and you can step away, and that has to be okay. But I was at work today and I remembered that it was Grandma's birthday, and I remembered that I'd written this poem, and I remembered that I was going to cry when I read it. And you may not have been able to tell because of how I cut around, but there were definitely a couple of times that I got a little choked. So, Etre-READS episode 1, maybe the pilot, maybe this is the pilot episode, and we'll see how it does. I do think, though, that regardless of how it does, if you do like it, please leave a comment, let me know, share something. But I think also, regardless of how it does, one of the reasons that I create whatever content I do, one of the reasons that I create anything, one of the reasons that I write a poem, is not necessarily to get renown. I think I am at the point where I'm happy to share these works, and I feel like maybe I have enough to the point that something can be really done with them in a tangible way that isn't just sort of like throwing them out there. But the reason I create content is because I enjoy doing it. And I realize that there is, a certain limitation. No one should starve, right? Like, you should only do things that are sustainable in some way. But when it comes to creating art, I highly encourage you, if you are struggling in any way with the sort of sustainable aspect of things, please start small. Please do something. You can always come back to a painting and paint a little more each day. You don't have to compose a poem in a day. You can write a couple sentences to a story, or write a different part of the story that recently comes to mind. And as long as you are doing things that fulfill you, I think that's going to be the thing that makes it all sustainable. I hope and would love to create content, whatever content that may be, though I don't want to get into anything too like cringe or, I don't know, clickbaity type stuff, but engrossing content and entertaining content, and have that be the full-time thing that I am doing. I would love to put, my theatrical background to purpose, my vocal background to purpose, my literary background to purpose, or at least education to purpose. And so, but I'm also not in a rush for that day to come. And something in the back of my brain is just telling me that that's the way that it's going to. Eventually. As all good things do. So happy birthday, Grandma. I love you. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sharing this moment with me. And please, if you do nothing else today, tell one person that you believe is good why you think they're good. Preferably, if you are going to, I can already see that someone is going to leave a comment saying me, and I do appreciate that if that thought crossed your mind at all. But please also find someone outside of me. I appreciate it though, however, if you did enjoy this video. And despite the fact that I am probably just talking to you from a magic box now and not in the same room, and you are watching from potentially miles away, I don't think that also quite means there is not some amount of connection. Though, to be fair, please, however we are going to do this, let's navigate this parasocial relationship together in a healthy way. If you are unfamiliar with that term in any way, don't worry about it, but I am going to also put a link below to a panel that was done at Final 3 Con this year by Habby and Navian. I think Navian was part of it, or maybe Avery, of Connecticut Blood on the Clock Tower, CTBOTC. Because in this age of internets and celebrities, it's important. But on that note, I think I do know the topic of the next video to come within this format. Because there's a reason that I believe that distance doesn't necessarily mean a lack of connection. And I guess I will see you next time. Take care of yourselves. Bye. I do want to throw out a special shout out to our Patreon members. Thank you to our epic patrons, Toki, Tomcat, Leo the Leopard, and Mathblade. Our legendary patrons, Irie, Kevin Young, Caspian Drago, Clara, Jeffy Z, Alan Michael, That Guy's Hat, Rowan Wablin, Titus, Lumu, Guggy, open parenthesis, cool, closed parenthesis, Ongaku, Arbater, and Dark Saphira, and our mythical patrons, the cream of the crop, Siobhan Reed, Rosiphius, Bluebeard, The Lost, and Kageiichi. Your support means the absolute world to me. Thank you so much for showing your love, both for me and also for all things gaming. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.